Welcome, everyone, to the season finale of Draft on Tap. My name is Aldo Gandia. Our guest, Herb Howard, will join us in about fits. And I just want to make one programming note before I introduce Danny, is that tomorrow morning I am going to re-show our draft coverage from days 1, 2, and 3, but editing out all the selections of the other teams, because we had 16, 17, 18 hours of broadcasting, and just have Danny and Jordan's and John Buffone's and other reactions to the pick. So I thought it would be a good way to, as opposed to sifting through 18 hours of programming, just sift through 1 hour so you can get up to the minute instant reaction to those draft picks. And one other note, there's nobody at the Barroom Network during this time of the year that works as hard as Danny Shimon. And so I want to shout him out for the incredible work that he did preparing for our weekly episodes here on the Barroom Network and preparing for the draft. And he will be as a part of the Buffon 55 trio during the regular season. And so that's must-see TV on Wednesday nights. Danny, Alyssa Barberi, and John Buffon. Let me bring in Danny. I didn't want to say it with him on camera because we didn't want to see him blush. So hopefully there's been time now to recover his full color. How are you, brother?
I make me cry before. I mean, I'm already feeling a little sensitive with the last show. It's like, man, it's been a journey, right? I feel like it was just like yesterday in January. The season ended, and we were just knee deep into the tape, and next thing you know, like the draft's over, and it's the off season for me and for you. I think you take some time. Don't you take some time off as well, though?
Yeah, in fact, I've started to tell some of the show hosts that I'm going to take several weeks off just to spend time with family and do a little traveling. But
thank you for the kind words. Obviously, thank you for the platform. Thank you for the listeners for wanting to tune in and listen to my scouting reports. I do it all for you guys. I mean, I love doing it, and it was fun. It was a blast. God willing, we'll be back here again next year, breaking down some more prospects for next year's draft.
I've already seen mock drafts for the 2015 NFL draft. Like, whoa.
Yep. Let the fun begin.
Yeah. So, and do you, based on your preliminary knowledge of the prospects from next year, do you think that next year's draft is going to be a deeper draft than the 2024? Because we've heard all these stories that this year's draft wasn't as deep because a lot of players went back to school.
There's an expectation it's going to be a deeper class. I mean, just kind of go through some of these undrafted free agent lists, and then they're guys that it's hard to find. Some even seventh rounders. You're like, ooh, these guys usually are typical undrafted free agents. But next year's class is deeper, and it's deeper in defense as well. So that's something that how we saw this year's class was really deep in offense. I think next year's class is going to be potentially is going to be deeper on the defensive side. So, if the Bears go into next year still needing a defensive end or a defensive tackle or whatnot, that's a good draft to have next year.
Indeed. We've got a lot of topics to cover, and Herb is going to pop in here anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes from now, and when he does, we'll cut to him. But I wanted to ask, Danny, I put this up on the Barroom Network account. I was interested in seeing the skill positions for the 3 other NFC North teams and to try to get an idea of where we rank, at least on paper. Of course, performance is everything. So, the Bears with Moore, Allen, Odunze, Kmet, Gerald Everett, and DeAndre Swift pose a very formidable offensive weapons team. But take us through the rest of these guys, Danny, and tell me, what can we expect out of this team? It seems to me like some of these teams may need to add some more firepower if they can find it.
Yeah, I mean, the question you asked me was, are the Bears competitive, or are they the best or potentially the best within the division? I think they're very close now. I think for me, still the best is when you have a Justin Jefferson leading a receiving corps. I think he is I think that offensive skill set group is probably the best there in the division. Obviously with him and Jordan Addison, last year's first round pick, and TJ Hawkinson, and adding Aaron Jones to it. And, they already have a formidable defense. And now all you need is like competent quarterback play from the Sam Darnold or the rookie J.J. McCarthy, I think the Vikings will be right there as well. I think in second or closest second, and you can toss up here between the Packers and the Bears. DJ Moore, you have a number one receiver there. You have Keenan Allen, who's also been a number one receiver, and you have Roma Dunze, who I'm so excited to potentially bring in this group here and just see him develop and have that trio go out there work. And obviously, we saw Cole Kmet get better. Year after year, and then you had Gerald Everett, who was more of a swing tight end. DeAndre Swift is a guy that's talented, but I'm not there yet with him. But and looking at the Packers, obviously Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, those two have been Doubs and Watson have been up and down, but Reed kind of was a sensation last year as a rookie. I think they generally go the Packers do is how the run game goes. So now obviously getting Aaron Jones out, who to me was their best offensive player last year, and putting in a Josh Jacobs, who might be younger and a little bit more talented, but just the overall the attitude and the swagger that Aaron Jones brought, I think that's a huge loss there for Green Bay. So we'll see how it goes. For me, the Lions are the least, if you ask me, the least talented in terms of skill position groups. Amon St. Brown is an All-Pro. Jameson Williams to me has been up and down, a little bit of a, he's bordering on a bust, but this is a big year for him, in my opinion. Khalif Raymond's been, kind of a third down, punt return kind of guy. And Sam Laporta was really that big, help boost last year in terms of the passing game with him out of the tight end. Obviously, that two-headed monster with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. If they had a competent receiver opposite of Amon St. Brown, or if Jameson Williams takes that next leap and becomes that deep threat that he was, called to be or thought to be coming out of Alabama, then we're talking about the Lions. But if you ask me to rank them right now, honestly, although, and I'm being just I'm not being a fan here. I'm just saying Vikings 1, potentially Bears 2, Packers 3, and Lions 4.
I'll tell you, I see it a little bit different. I mean, let me ask you this first. Did you keep in mind what the quarterback situation is for these four teams when you ranked them the way you did?
I did, and Minnesota is that's the one that's the hesitant there, and but I think but what keeps me back is Kevin O'Connell. I think he's a play caller just like a Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, and winds up he won't let his quarterback put him in positions where he's going to fail him. Right? He might not be spectacular. He's not going to take a average Joe and make him an All Pro, but he's going to put him in situations where, hey man, just be competent, make the easy throw here, make the easy throw there, and you're going to get some yards, get some points on the board. And again, just a talent with Justin Jefferson, I think, and then Russell, Jordan Addison on the outside as well, and Hawkinson. I think that's where, and the offensive line too. It's young and it's developing. The tackles are young and developing. So I think, like I said, if you get competent play, but yes, I did take that into effect, but then I took into effect the play caller. So that's how I came with that.
That's a good reason to do that. A good reason for having the Vikings at the spot that you have them. I believe, though, that it's still the Lions, and only because of the potential of Jameson Williams, who started the season, he missed the first half of the season, and then I saw flashes in the second half that tell me that this guy could potentially be an NFL star. And the work of Sam Laporta, and I apologize, I misspelled Jahmyr Gibbs there, but the work of those two second-year guys, I expect them to be even better. I've loved Gibbs since I saw him in college and what he can do out of the backfield, carrying and catching passes. David Montgomery is going to get you the tough yards, so that's an important weapon. And the experienced quarterback, and one more year with the same offensive coordinator won't hurt. The Packers, on the other hand, they've got some really talented, they've done well in drafting, but they're still unproven players like Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave and so forth. They need some more experience. But let me get to the question of the quarterback position a la the Green Bay Packers. What do you think about Jordan Love? He had a second half of the season that everyone praised, but I'm not totally convinced that's the quarterback we're going to see throughout the 2024 season. What do you think?
I'm not either, although because the one thing, that was his rookie year. I mean, that was his, not technically his rookie year, but that was his first year starting. And remember, this is the thing I look for after a rookie or a quarterback, finishes their either the rookie campaign or the first full year starter, is now the league has 16, 17 games of tape on you. Now they have a whole offseason to go in there and come up with a game plan to stop you and your strengths and all that stuff, because he was still relatively unknown last year. So now it's on, the pressure is on LaFleur and Jordan Love to be able to kind of see what the defense now attacks them with, and can they bounce back? Because we've seen guys come in, have great rookie years, and then just fall flat on their face because they just couldn't adjust to what the league was doing in terms of defensively. So that's the thing I'm going to look at with Jordan Love. So that's a good point there. That's a key thing. That's why they weren't up there with Minnesota for me. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Minnesota, again, just a skill position. And I do agree with you in terms of Detroit, in terms of that they go as that running game goes, and the home run hitting ability of Jamar Gibbs, and the pounding between the tackles of David Montgomery, and also Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator who does a good job in terms of setting up everything via the play action, via the run. And I think that's also a big element there as well. But I just want one more consistent weapon, and it could be Jamison Williams. It very well could be him. But I just want one more consistent weapon opposite of Amon and St. Brown, and now you're going to see that offense really take off, in my opinion.
Yeah. And no surprise, resident Lions fan Don Burr disagrees. Lions fourth. This is hilarious. This will age horribly. Thanks, Don.
We'll see, Don. Well, I mean, if Jamison Williams takes that next step,
yeah,
I agree. I mean, that's – but you need someone consistent opposite of Amon and St. Brown, in my opinion.
Indeed. Now, let's talk about the offensive coordinators. You mentioned Ben Johnson with the Detroit Lions, and there's this great unknown with Shane Waldren and how he's going to run this Bears offense. What are your expectations based on the little that we know? Of course, we know a lot of the offenses that he ran prior to the Chicago Bears, but who knows exactly what he's going to run here in Chicago. He should have more autonomy than he had under former Seahawks coach, what's his name again?
Pete Carroll?
Yes, Pete Carroll. He should have more autonomy with the Bears. So what's your inkling? What is he going to do?
Well, obviously, I mean, just kind of going off of what he did with Russell Wilson and what we saw him do with Geno Smith, I think he's going to have a quarterback-friendly system. He's going to take – and the good news is they've already, according to, I believe it was Ryan Poles, I forgot who had kind of leaked it out, where Shane Waldron's already been kind of installing the offense with Caleb Williams in mind, so like 6 weeks ago or something like that. So that's he's already got an idea, which is great, right? And this is why I love having guys with experience. He's done it before. He's done it for 3 years. Obviously, we know his past. He comes from the Sean McVay, tree. So I think, in terms of his route, it's going to be all play action. We're going to get wide zone, inside zone, so on and so forth. We'll see some power maybe here and there, but it's going to be predominantly based off the play action. We should see 2-3 tight end sets. And then I think then you're going to go on from there and just build it around the strengths of Caleb Williams. So obviously, in my opinion, I don't want to throw Caleb out to the Wolves right away. And I know he's a highly touted prospect and all that stuff, but still he's going to be a rookie. He's going to come to a league where it's different, right? And so I would just kind of like to get his feet wet a little bit and just kind of not put all this on him, all this pressure on him to win your games. Let's let the if the defense has improved like they showed at the end of last year, let's let the defense kind of do their thing. Offensively, let's ball control, play action, roll out, RPOs, all that stuff, mix it up, and we're not going to have a quarterback run heavy offense, but we're going to have a three-headed monster back there, I think, with running backs, and then also include your tight ends in there. And obviously now the 3 receivers out there. I think so. It's going to be a lot of play action, a lot of boots, rollouts, and all that stuff, but also a lot more structural plays in the offenses. And I'm sorry, with the quarterback in the pocket as well.
And of course, when you have offensive weapons, none of it will work if you don't have protection for the quarterback and holes for running backs to run through. So offensive line-wise, are you happy? What are the concerns you have about the Chicago Bears offensive line as it stands today on paper?
Yeah, and that's something I was going to touch with Herb about as well is they pretty much, other than defensive line, maybe here and there, a couple of prospects here and there, but they haven't really done much with the offensive line. And they've added some veterans in terms of like some depth, some veteran depth and all that stuff. Obviously, they brought in Ryan Bates to potentially be the starting center, Coleman Shelton to be a backup there as well. But the rest of the positions are pretty much have stayed, similar. Now, the third round pick, Kieran from Yale, he's a tackle with, 36-inch arms but he's played right guard before. So, I know Greg and I talked about it, on that Saturday draft show. Could he possibly kick inside the guard. Great things with those that arm length. Maybe it's not best suited for him, but that's something that's what worries me here. Because let's start from the outside. The tackles, I think Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones, I think they're solid, right? Darnell Wright going to his second year. I think Braxton Jones going into his third year. This is a huge year for Braxton Jones. I think obviously Ryan Poles and company are fans of him. I think they believe in him, as do you and I, Aldo. So I think now is a big year for Braxton Jones to take that next step, right? His third year to solidify the position. None of some of the stuff we saw early on in the year last year. So I think those tackles are solid. Inside, it kind of bothers me. Now Tevin Jenkins, I when he's on the field and he's healthy, I love watching him play. But the problem is when he's on the field and when he's healthy, and then that's an issue. Now he's going to his contract year as well. So can he solidify the left guard? When they flipped him over to right guard, when Nate Davis was on, I thought he was better at right guard, me personally, right? So that could be a potential there where we talk about Curran, the young kid from Yale. If he kicks inside to a left guard, maybe move Tevin Jenkins over to right guard. Now everybody talks about Nate Davis, and I've said Nate Davis, that last game against Green Bay put a bad taste in my mouth. But again, the whole offensive line had a bad game, right? So I don't want to just pick on Nate Davis. And again, he did go through some personal issues early in the year, so there's always a possibility he's going to come back and bounce back and solidify and have a great year. So that's the hope there as well. But that's the inside the guys. Those guards are kind of like with Tevin with his injury history. Nate, is he going to be able to bounce back? If not, do we have guys that can come in and challenge those guys for their spots?
Yeah, and the concern that I have about Nate Davis, and I totally understand, the personal issues, and God bless him, and it's tough to go through something like that, what he went through. But when you look at what he did at Buffalo, he was basically a B plus, A minus run blocker, but a C at best pass blocker, and I don't know really if. When he played his best in 2023, I don't know if he was anything other than that, an average lineman. Your thoughts?
Well, when he was healthy and when he came back and got back into rhythm, I think him and Darnell Wright formed a formidable duo on the right side in terms of creating holes as a run blockers, creating leverage there and moving guys off their spots. Pass blocking you're right, it was never his strong suit. But just what we saw early in the year is there was one gif. It was him and the center were kind of blocking each other. I forgot which game it was. It was just it was like an embarrassment over the internet. And it's like stuff like that. Was it a mental stuff? Was it his head not in the game? And then he got, kind of got back in the groove of things there when he came back. And then, we didn't notice him, right? When an offensive lineman, if you don't notice them, that means they're doing a solid job. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, like the tail end of the season, like things started coming back down again, and his play started coming back down again. So that's a huge question mark. And again, they haven't done anything. I don't know if they're going to do anything in terms of post-draft, in terms of veteran free agents. Like I said, they picked up some guys here and there for some depth. But I don't think they have anybody here that's going to come in and be able to challenge Nate Davis for that starting job already.
John says teams are going to man up and blitz Caleb up the middle in his lap and face all year long. If he is throwing off his back foot all year, it's not good. This offensive line is more of a welcome mat and less of a shield.
And that's where Shane Waldren comes in, right? That's where Shane Waldren, now you have an experienced offensive play caller, right? He's been in the league 3 years, doing this for 3 years, as opposed to Luke Getty, who was a first-time play caller, who prior to that was a position coach with the Packers. How is he going to adjust? How is he going to, if this is what defense are doing to Caleb Williams, how is he going to roll him out more? Is he going to do more play action something? What is his comeback if that actually does happen, if they actually do blitz him? Now, with the weapons they have on the outside, I don't see how they're going to completely continue blitzing Caleb Williams. It's not like Caleb Williams hasn't seen pressure in his face before. Just put on his 2023 tape from USC, and the kid would get the ball back there, and next thing you know, he's got guys coming after him all over the place. So we'll see how that happens. But again, that's where Shane Waldron comes in. This is where you protect the kid and protect the rookie and see what they're doing and design plays that will get him out of trouble like that.
All right. So let's turn over to the defense. We're still waiting on Herb Howard. Hopefully he's going to make it tonight. Let's turn over to the defense. You were adamant about, the fact that the Bears did not address the defensive line position earlier in the draft. They did acquire Austin Booker. They got back into the draft to acquire him. Your thoughts on how he could potentially help this draft, and what do you foresee out of this defensive line? Given that really the only addition that they've had, they lost Justin Jones, so they haven't replaced him as from a defensive tackle perspective, and the only addition is a fifth-round rookie.
Yeah, and that's still a concern for me, and it's something where like the interior is a concern for me. Will they go out there and get another inside guy, defensive tackle? Whether it's a veteran free agent or whatnot, maybe a trade or whatnot. So we'll see what happens there. Edge is still a concern for me, but it's less of a concern now that they got Austin Booker. Not that Austin Booker is going to come in week one and be a starter. Obviously, as we talked on the draft show, this is a kid that's a late bloomer. He's only 21 years old. Went to Minnesota for 2 years, didn't play, went to Kansas last year, had a great year, and came out early, right? He's a guy that still needs to put on some weight, get a little bigger, a little stronger. But I just like the potential he brings in terms of the speed, the get off, the length he has, and what he showed at the Senior Bowl in terms of his ability to go up against, top end guys there. Some guys that, for example, Jordan Morgan, that went into the first round to the Packers and just show out there. And so that gives me hope that he could at least have a role where, being maybe a situational pass rusher, someone that comes in on long passing situations, and you can kick the Marcus Walker inside maybe to a 3 technique and give you what a lot of people like to call their NASCAR package out on the field there. So, but I think that they still need a couple more players there, veterans now, whether they bring back Yannick Ngakoue. I know that's something we discussed on the draft show, just as a veteran stopgap, whether that ship has sailed, who knows? But I still would think that they would, after this first wave, or this initial wave of after the draft, there's going to be some guys getting cut, and let's see if they pick up anybody. There's a couple interesting names on a trade market, but again, now you're dipping into next year's draft class, and we talked about how deep that is in terms of defense next year. So it's got to be like the right player for the right time to be able to go. For me to be able to give up future draft capital. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's something that I still have some questions about, some concerns over. And I know they signed Coward, a veteran, but is he a one gap? Is he just a guy that can plug up the middle there and kind of just help them in terms of run defense? But in terms, and then the big thing obviously is they're expecting is my expectation is the young guys, right? Dexter and Zach Pickens taking that next step. Now they're becoming, those guys that maybe man that middle of that defensive line, and with Dexter being that 1 technique and Pickens being that 3 technique, that 1 gap penetrator. And now those guys taking their next step. And that happens. Now, obviously the loss of Justin Jones, well, it still might be felt more, in the locker room and in terms of depth. It'll probably, take a little bit less of a hurt if those guys take the next step and now they become, consistent productive producers there inside. But yeah, I think at least one more edge player to come in and just at least compete in training camp would be something that I would keep an eye on.
Dan Wiederer did indeed report that the Bears are in touch with Yannick Ngakoue, checking in on how his rehabilitation is going. And I'm sure they've told him we're still interested in you coming back next season. And then J-Rock has an interesting question. He says, Poles should do whatever it takes to get defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, who's due about $44 million over the last 2 years of his contract. What do you think? Well, guess what? Our guest has just arrived, and so I'm going to give him a minute to set up because I see him looking over his controls, so I won't get to that question. But keep it in mind because I will ask it. Maybe you can ask Herb that in your interview. I think he's ready now. Herb Howard, how are you, my friend?
I am phenomenal. I'm phenomenal. What's going on? I'm sorry for being late. I apologize. Happy to be here. I'm good. How y'all doing?
Hey, saw you on Football Night in Chicago tonight. Great job with David Hall and Josh Struck. And before the show started, Danny was telling me, man, I love Herb Howard's questions at these press conferences. And I think every Bears fan does. You do a phenomenal job. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your career and how you got to your place. But first, I'd love for you and Danny to talk some football. We were talking about a few issues, so to maintain continuity, I'm going to step out of the picture and let you talk to our lead draft analyst, Danny Shimon.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Herb. Well, thanks again for taking some time and on your busy schedule to join us. We do really appreciate it. And like Aldo says, I was mentioning to him, I'm like, I love the questions Herb asks. It's they're deep. They make the guys think up there. And it's not like some of the other guys that ask. Some might ask easy questions. Some might ask like just Potsy. I love Potsy's questions, but they're just like right in your face kind of questions. But you like make the guys. I think it might have been you who asked Ryan Poles a question after the draft. And he's like, ask it again because he was thinking about your question. I think it might have been you. Sure. And then he's like, ask that again because he was like, how can I answer this question thoroughly? But anyway, great job. Big fan.
I appreciate that. And again, thanks so much for having me, man. I love what y'all do here. Respected the work here for a long time. So I'm thrilled to be here.
So, and you know, I likewise back to you. So, like we were talking right before, you know, in terms of the draft, is obviously over now, and you know, obviously for me, I think it's consensus right now. The first 2 picks were locks or home runs, you know, by Ryan Poles. I think, you know, the one interesting thing would have been to me was if Ndunzi wasn't there at number 9, what would have happened? But that's gone now. So, but you know, in terms of the rest of the draft, obviously, you know, the young kid from Yale, the tackle, you know, even Poles said he's more of a developmental kid. So I don't foresee him getting on the field next year. You know, the one area they haven't really attacked so far. Now I know they brought in some veteran guys as more depth guys, but the offensive line and going into this season potentially, how do you feel about the offensive line? Or you know, in terms of obviously, I think 2 young tackles. I think Braxton Jones has still I think is a huge year for him. But the guards, I mean, that last game in Green Bay really put a bad taste in my mouth and a lot of Bears fans' mouth. So I know they have the new center in there, Ryan Bates. But how do you think the offensive line's forming, and do you think they're done there?
Yeah, the best word I can use right now for the offensive line is hopeful. Right, I can't use any stronger term than that. I can't say, you know, confident. I won't even necessarily use optimistic. I'm just hopeful that one, they can stay healthy. When you talk about Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins, most importantly, if those 2 guys can stay healthy, if they can get you 14, 15 starts apiece, then I think the line will probably be okay. Right, we know what Darnell Wright is. I expect him to continue to ascend, ultimately being probably one of the better right tackles in the league. I think he's on that type of trajectory. No problem with him. I know the Bears continue to have faith in Braxton Jones. They like his traits. They like his length, his athleticism, his ability to get out on the edge. Certainly, it's a huge jump for him coming as a 5th-round rookie from Southern Utah to being in the NFL. But now he has 2 years in the National Football League as a starting left tackle. And so you expect him to take just another jump, another step forward this year. So I think they're comfortable there. They like their guards, I think, right? When Tevin Jenkins is on the field, he's a difference maker. Everybody can kind of see that. The issue is when he's on the field because he tends to have, you know, some nagging injury here, something going on there. And when he's not on the field, you can tell the difference. And so the first thing is to hope that they're healthy at their guard position with Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins. And then you got to see how Ryan Bates settles in at center, right? You still haven't signed. You don't have like a proven, you know, certified, legitimate center. I know, you know, they you know, get the center from LA, and he started a lot of games there last year. But I think Ryan Bates is kind of the leader in the clubhouse for that spot right now. And so you just kind of got to see how it gels, man. I think the main thing with those guys will be health. How many starts collectively can you get out of that first group of 5? And then what's the depth look like, right? Where's your interior depth? Who's your swing tackle? Those types of things still got to get worked out. I don't know that Karen Amagaji is ready to necessarily be the swing tackle, right? Maybe that you kind of hope so, that like his traits as well, similar to what happened with Braxton came out of college. They like the length, they like the athleticism, those types of things, but still making a huge jump from Yale to the National Football League. And so it's going to take some time for him as well. So again, the best I can say right now, Dan, is hopeful. I'm hopeful that 1, they can stay healthy, and 2, they can gel as a unit.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with Tevin Jenkins. You know, once he's on the field, it's like you notice him. You notice his blocks. You notice, you know, the nastiness he brings to that offensive line. So, and the other thing, I think this is going to be a big, the rest of the, you know, before training camp, if they extend him, how much they believe in him, right? So I know there was an early when Brian Poles and Eberflus came in, there was some tension, a little bit, you know, reported tension between, you know, Jenkins and those guys. So we'll see how that goes. But you know, someone asked me,
he took some time to accept the position change, right? Going to guard, and he admitted it. Like he's like, I still think I'm a tackle. And then last year he had come around to before the season started. He's like, no, I'm a guard, and I'm cool with it. So I think that process definitely took some time with them.
So kind of my next question, leading into that, maybe back to the offense line. I'm curious to see what your answer is here. But someone asked me, like, you know, if Caleb Williams doesn't succeed his first year, and succeed, I'm talking about, you know, have a great year, right? Now you could, you know, obviously he's a rookie. There's a big, you know, learning curve, whatever. If I asked you, Herb, if Caleb Williams has a bad year, what do you think the reason for that would have been?
I would probably say mismanagement, right? Just using him the wrong way. And I think already starting to hear some whispers about that through the fan base, through some of the people who cover the team. And it's like, they're like, hey, I can't wait to let him sling it around 45, 50 times a game. Like, why would you do that?
Exactly.
For what reason would you put him in that position? It's not necessary. Now, it's good to have a roster and a collection of talent to where you can now win a shootout. But why would you start the shootout? You know what I mean? Like that, you don't need to do that. You got some proven backs behind you. You got DeAndre Swift, you got Khalil Herbert. They both have proven that they can be productive at this level. You got tight ends, you got a really good defense. Why would you come out 1st and 10 pass, 2nd and 10, now you 3rd and long, put them in these, less than advantageous positions, right? And then you put a lot of pressure on the unit that we're talking about, which is probably the weakest link right now, or at least the biggest question mark on the roster. Now you're putting all this onus on the O-line to hold up when you don't have to do that. You want to get them in as many, 3rd and shorts, 3rd and manageables as possible. And, I think you lean on your running game to be able to do that. So I think if he's not successful this year with his own personal ability, his drive for the game, his willingness to work, his desire to be great, and the collection of weapons around him, if he's not successful, and again, I'm not talking like you saying, we're not talking, MVP, nothing crazy like that. But if he struggles deep into this season, my first guess would be that he was mismanaged.
Like a Bryce Young struggle, right? That's what I'm talking about.
Right,
That's something like that. So now we know that's a whole different story. Bryce Young and all the weapons and all that stuff that was gone. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing with me. And that's when I go back to Shane Waldren. Obviously, you've interviewed him, you've met him. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all going to kind of learn Shane Waldren, as he comes here in Chicago, what he does. And the one thing I took heart in was the fact that they already kind of started installing some of the offense around Caleb, right? With 6 weeks ago or something like that. Someone reported, that they already kind of started putting some concepts in and all that stuff. And that's where I think Shane Waldren has have to come in and prove to himself that, he is the proven play caller that the Bears thought they were getting from Seattle and kind of build a system around Caleb. And I agree with you 100%. We were just talking about it. Like, don't put Caleb out there to fail early on. Like, rely on the running game, establish the run, go 12 personnel, go 13 personnel if you have to, and then now utilize some of his rollout, some of his athletic abilities, and then you can start using some of the ability downfield. So yeah, that's the one thing. That's what we're all gonna, I guess, be looking at Shane Waldren from your early on. And I know it's not really in depth sit downs with Shane. What are the feelings you get from Shane, and do you think he's a guy that they introduce him as adaptable, right? You think he's the guy that's going to come in here and actually build a system, which is, I was dying for Getsy to build a system around Justin Fields last year, and he just didn't do it. Do you think Waldron will actually do that, take Caleb and his strengths and build everything around him?
Yeah, that's the biggest evaluation for me, for any coach, Danny. Like how do you tailor your system to the talent that you have on your roster? And I know all coaches, especially at the NFL level, have a bit of arrogance to them, right? You don't get to that level without having this idea that I know how to win the game better than you know how to win the game, right? So that's fine, but you still have to have enough sense to say, okay, well, what do my players do well? How do I make this system work for what they do well? And I think that's going to be the thing I got my eye on. I can't sit here and tell you I have a great sense for whether or not he is or is not going to do that, or he is or is not capable of doing that, right? You can look at some of the things that he's done in the past, some of the people that he's worked with in the past. You can talk about, resurrecting Geno Smith and all those different types of things. But I think until you get a chance up close with in-depth knowledge of the roster that he had, I don't know that much about the Seattle Seahawks roster, right? And each individual player's talents to say, was he catering the weekly game plan to their strengths? And so I think, we'll get a chance to see that kind of up close and personal. And we know these players in depth. We know what they do well. We know what they struggle with. We know what their strengths and weaknesses. So, how is he able to utilize those things? And how does he implement those things on, first of all, just a large scale basis, a big picture basis, but also then that week to week thing, that half to half thing, that drive to drive. How are you able to put your players in the best positions based on what the defense is trying to do to you? And I think that was one of the things that we saw Luke Getsy struggle with during his time here, was his inability to kind of adjust, to adapt to what the defense was trying to do and then find those answers. It's fine that you want to throw screens against that exotic, Minnesota defense is going to bring all those different pressures. We know what they like to do. So it's cool that you want to throw those screens. But once it's shown that how they're playing those screens, then what do you have behind that? You got a pump and go. You got something like, what else do you have? And I think that's where he struggled the most. And that'll be the biggest test when we're trying to evaluate Shane Waldron. Does he have some counters to the things that the defenses want to do? And does he have a good plan to maximize what his players do well? And I don't think that would be wise to put that all on Caleb's shoulders right off the jump. He may be ready for it. Right? I'm not saying he's not, but why would you start that way? So yeah, it's definitely, shout out to Coach T down there in the chat. It's definitely all eyes on Shane right now to try to figure out what's going on.
Right. Exactly. And now, so then to the other side, and I'm still of the mindset, and Alden and I were just talking already before you jumped on here, was I still want a defensive lineman or two, man. And I think Justin Jones is a guy that a lot of people might be taking for granted. I know he, kind of got off to a rocky start, but I mean, he turned it on in the last year. He was dominant,
especially once Montez came.
Yes, exactly. That test effect, he felt it, right? And so I think that's going to be a loss there. And obviously they expect the young guys to take the next step, Pickens and Dexter, and obviously that building's there, but he's more of a rotational guy. Like, do you think, or do you foresee them going out and making another move, whether it's veteran free agency or maybe even a trade to bring in another interior guy or even maybe an edge guy? I know we talked about Yannick maybe still being in play here as well.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would lean more towards that they're probably looking still for some help at the edge spot. I think they are. I'm hopeful on the young D tackles. When you talk about Javon, you talk about Zach, I'm hopeful on them. Javon definitely started to show some signs late in the season. I think that was a part of bringing Montez over as well. He multiplied all of those guys. They all started to play better. Justin Jones, Javon Dexter, DeMarcus Walker played better once Montez was here. So I think they're kind of counting on that. But they're also counting on those two young guys. So they drafted pretty high last year to take that next step and become, difference makers on the football field. And they also, like you said, Billings isn't going to play past second down. He's a stud on first and second down. You can't move him off his spot. He's eating up running backs. He's eating up lanes. He's eating up blockers. Love what he brings to the table. And then on third down, they have the ability to kick DeMarcus Walker inside. And then what do you bring on the outside? I don't think it's fair to put all that responsibility on Booker right now. I don't think that the Dominique Robinson experiment is going to continue for much longer. And so you got to have somebody over there that's proven that you can say, okay, it's 3rd and 9. Let's pin our ears back and let's go get somebody. And I think you may end up seeing, a Yannick Ngakoue come on and add to the roster. I wanted some help on the interior. I'm still looking for that dominant, game-changing 3-tech that this defense requires, right? You got to have that Tommy Harris, that Warren Sapp. This defense requires that. Everybody's heard Flus talk about it being the engine of the defense. We all know that. Hopefully, Javon Dexter can kind of grow into that role. Zach Pickens made some flashes that he can come in and help with that as well. But you got to have 7-8 guys right now as a rotation. And the Bears, they're a little bit short of 7-8, proven commodities on that defensive front right now. And so some projections that they're making, some hopes that they have. But I think you're still going to see some guys added now, whether that's before camp, whether that's at roster cuts, whatever it may be. I think the easiest solution would be to bring in Yannick Ngakoue. He knows the system, him. From what I hear, he's on track to be ready and healthy for training camp. And so, if that's the case, that seems to make the most sense. If you can try to get him in here, $5-7 million or something like that, then that would probably make the most sense. And then you'll have a decent enough package to get some consistent pressure on third downs. And that back seven is ready to take the ball away, right? As long as you don't leave them back there for 5-6 seconds every time, they're ready to make some plays.
And that's where I think Booker can maybe potentially come in and be a situational guy that can, rush on, because his first step quickness and his ability to get after the quarterback at that Senior Bowl really stood out for me.
He long too, man. He got that great length and he used it, right? So he knows he's 240, right? He's got the frame. He should be able to add another 20, 25 pounds of muscle. He should be able to do that. But even right now, he's able to use his length to keep those 300, 320-pound tackles off of him to say, all right, let me keep you at a length, and then I can use my burst, my explosiveness. He's got the spin move. He's got the speed. He's got that bendability to cut the corner. So third down, I think back to a guy like Mark Anderson, when he came here. I'm not saying that Booker's going to give you, 10 sacks or anything like that right now, but that kind of frame is able to, succeed and produce in this system.
And then get off, especially if you get some pressure inside the middle. So, just quickly going back to defense tackle, I know this is more like hearsay and all that stuff, but, I looked at Washington's draft, and Johnny News in there, and they have Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. I don't know if Jonathan Allen's a real good fit for that Dan Quinn system. Could that be someone that the Bears go snooping around there and see what it would cost to get him?
I'm sure they'd be kicking the tires on it to at least find out. I do think that at some point there's going to be a ceiling on where they think they can continue to invest in this defensive line. I mean, that's just the nature of the business, and I know. A lot of these guys were intriguing. It would have been great to get Daniil Hunter in here, right? But at some point, you got to say, okay, we gave Montez 100. Like, how much more can we pour into this offensive line before we at least find out if we've got something with our young draft picks, right? Ideally, that's how everybody wants to build their team through the draft. So, I think it'd be, prudent of them to at least kick the tires and find out what's going on with him. But if it gets too expensive, I expect Ryan Poles to stay disciplined to his plan, look towards the future and say, okay, well, what can we do going forward? They got 3 picks in the top 2 rounds next year, too. I don't view this team as currently constructed as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, right? I do think they should be a playoff team, but I don't think they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender this year. And so, you start to look towards, okay, well, where can we add over the course of the next year and a half, 2 years, and say, okay, now we're ready, right? Because you still want to be ready before Montez Sweat's contract is up. DJ Moore's going to be coming up. I know you got the tag that you can use on some of these guys, but you want to get, to that point where you're a Super Bowl window. And I think I legitimately think it opens for them next year, their Super Bowl window, but you want to make sure you get there before you got to start, paying some of these veteran guys. And so, I think that right now they're hopeful for the 2 young kids. I would be surprised if we saw a significant investment on the interior defensive line right now. I expect them to do something on the edge. I'd be surprised if whatever they did on the interior was really, a sexy move, an expensive move. I'd be surprised.
So we've touched on a lot of positions, right? Offense, defense. Is there one spot we haven't touched about or position group that you feel like still something that you're keeping an eye on going into training camp that, A, needs an upgrade or B, needs to step up their game next season?
Those are the only 2. It's the trenches, and I know that's key, right? It's football. At the end of the day, It's football. I know we got all the skill positions in the world. At the end of the day, who's controlling that line of scrimmage? And I think we got some questions on both sides, and I think we got some pieces. It may work out just fine, right? Nate Davis may be, proved him to be worth the contract they gave him. Tevin Jenkins may stay healthy and be the player that we know he can be when he is. Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens may take that next step. It may be fine, but those are the questions that we have right now. Other than that, I don't have any questions about this roster right now. They've got frontline talent and depth almost everywhere else. You look at the linebacker position, you got to love your 2 starters right there. You got Jack Sanborn. Every time he's on the field, he's making plays. I think Noah Sewell can ball, and he can't even find his way on the field because there's just too much talent and experience in front of him. The secondary is elite. I think they may be the best group in the National Football League, and they continue to get more experience. Obviously, it's going to start with Jalen Johnson, but what Kyler Gordon is able to bring, the jump that we saw Tyreek Stevenson make from week 1 to week 18 last year was significant. His ability to take on the tough coach, and John Hoke was on his ass every single day. Everything that kid did, Hoke was like, no, don't do it like that. Do it like this. And, he's another one of those guys that has that little kind of a little healthy arrogance to him, right? You kind of need that at corner. He's got that healthy arrogance to him. And sometimes those guys struggle to take on that tough coaching. He didn't, right? He was able to listen to it, digest it, and you saw him apply it to the field. He also was able to look at what Jalen Johnson was doing, kind of watch tape with Jalen Johnson, and then add those types of things into his game. That pick that Jalen Johnson had against Minnesota, where he was classic cover 2, he kind of followed the 1 inside, then dropped off to number 2 and got that pick. Tyreek had a very similar pick later in the season. I walked into the locker room after the game, and I was like, yo, that picker. He was like, man, it's all Jalen Johnson. He's like, just watching film with him, watching how he does things. So he's got that ability. I think the jump he took from 1 to 18 was significant. I think he's going to take an even bigger jump from year 1 to year 2. Love Kyler Gordon. I was expecting a huge year from him last year. Unfortunate that he broke his hand so early in the season. He wasn't, fully healthy in terms of being able to make plays on the ball, punch it out, those types of things. But I expect him to be healthy and have a huge season. I've always loved Jaquan Brisker, just what he brings, the attitude, the physicality, that demeanor, that energy. And then Byard's a vet, right? He's got ball production. He's seen it all before. So, at secondary, I don't have any questions there. We know what the wide receiver group is. You got Tyler Scott in the number 4 spot, but I don't even know when he's going to get on the field, right? You got 3 receivers in front. You got 2 tight ends. So when you're going to go 12 person, I don't even know when your 4th receiver is going to get on the field, barring injuries. And it's football. Somebody's going to go down somewhere. But at most of these spots, I like the depth that they have.
And don't forget, DeAndre Swift can run some slot receiver as well there if you line him up in a slot too. So, I mean, and then talk about Stevenson. Yeah, I was on him early on. Obviously, he was a rookie. I just felt like he might have been swimming upstream a little bit. And I felt like he needed to get benched and just kind of, sit down and kind of catch his breath. But they kept him out there. And again, another one we talked about, Tez effect, right? When Montez Sweat came here, he also, you saw the effect on the secondary. And Stevenson, I think, was one of the big benefactors there of that pressure up front from those front 4 guys. So that interception he had in Cleveland was phenomenal. So that just shows some of the talent he has there as well. But I agree with you as well too. So then just kind of looking at an overall picture. Obviously, you mentioned playoffs a couple times, and I know the Bears mentioned playoffs and their season-ending press conference. So Is it for Matt Eberflus? And this might be an unfair question that posed to you, but do you think this is how I think it is? Do you think it's playoffs or bust for Matt Eberflus? And if so, why not pull a trigger now and not have to make it work a quarterback go through this all over again? That was my biggest beef.
Yeah, I know it's kind of like repeating some of the history that we've seen before with that process. I think that he earned his way back though. And I do think that it's playoff or bust, right? I think that's where this roster is. I think that's where they should be in the process. The National Football League, this doesn't take long. It doesn't have to be a 10-year process to go worst to first. We've seen guys do it in a year. We've seen teams do it in a year. So that part of it, it just doesn't have to take long. So I think that, yeah, it should be playoffs or bust. But I think that he can lead them to the playoffs as their head coach. I think this is a team that should have won 10 games last year. I mean, they lost 3 games that they'd be hard pressed to try and lose those games again. Let me like the 20 points up on Denver, 12 points up on Detroit with 3-4 minutes to go. Like you can't lose those games. And so, if they take care of business in those games, you got at least 9, probably 10 wins last year. So I think that should be the floor right now, and that should get you into the playoffs. So yeah, absolutely. If they do something where they end up really kind of tanking and not really getting the job done, you gotta lay that blame on somebody. You could have laid it on them last year to say, hey, as a head coach, how you let these 3 games get away from you? But they brought him back. He navigated some tumultuous waters last year. Whether you talk about what happened with his defensive coordinator, his running backs coach, like it was just a lot of stuff going on there. And he kind of righted the ship when after week 4, it seemed real bad. Like I wouldn't have been, for me, I would have fired him on the field week 4. Like I would not been surprised if Ryan Poles came into that press conference like, yeah, he up out of here. And I would have been like, okay, that makes sense.
We were waiting.
Yeah, that made sense to me. But after that, to his credit, he turned that thing around. He took over as defensive play caller. I thought the defense was playing backwards before he took over, right? They were putting the onus on the front end to get home with 4 when the strength was always the back end. Put the onus on them. Let them hold up in coverage with single high or some zero pressures. Like, let them hold up. And I asked the DBs at one point, like, wouldn't y'all prefer? And they all to a man were like, yes, send them dudes. Now, if you're going to send them, they got to get there. Don't leave us back there forever. But we feel like we can hold up on the back end. Send them. The front 4 needs help. We don't need help back here. So I thought they were playing backwards. But once he took over, you start to see TJ Edwards coming on some timely blitzes, Kyler Gordon, Jaquan walked down in the box. And so I thought he did a lot of good things, in the last 2/3 of the season to kind of say that makes some sense. I'm okay with bringing him back. I thought he earned his way back, but I don't think that does anything for him this year. It's still playoffs, or they're probably going to be head coach searching again.
A few questions from the chat. Vizor Joe says, Herb and Danny, what about Khalil Campbell from Atlanta on a 1-year flyer? What do you guys think about the veteran?
Herb, go ahead.
Always loved Calais Campbell's game. Obviously a vet. He's seen it all. I don't know that is the answer, right? I've been thinking about this for a couple of days now too, and I just don't know that is the answer. I don't know that he's this, game-changing, difference-making player. I think right now at this point in his career, what I see him doing most on this roster is taking reps from Javon Dexter, from Zach Pickens, the guys that you hope to develop, that you want to see them take that next step. Now, could he help them out in terms of being a pro, in terms of how to prepare, how to take care of yourself? Sure. Love what he's been his entire career. But in terms of bringing him into this roster and expecting him to be a difference maker up front, I don't know about that. And if he's not going to be that, then I'd rather not take the reps away from those 2 kids behind him.
Yeah, I agree with you, Herb. I mean, I love the name, I love the player, I love the person. But how much does he have left? Now, some might say, oh, he'll be a great mentor to the young guys and maybe help propel them. Kind of like how Mercedes Lewis was a little bit last year to Cole Kmet, if you will. So, I mean, that's got some benefit there. But I mean, we're talking about some help on the field, and
right.
I just don't know how much he has left. But I mean, if he has a year left on him, I wouldn't mind giving him a flyer. But that's something we have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah.
Couple more. Kay says, what does Herb think of Bud Dupree or Emmanuel Ogbah for DE signings?
Not ideal. Both of those guys have been mostly 3-4 guys. So not ideal. But listen, I'm fine with them kicking the tires on all these guys. Like I said earlier, Yannick makes the most sense as a system fit, as a guy who knows the building, knows the staff. Him. That seems to make the most sense for me. But if you get either questions from the doctors on the medical that, we don't really know when he's going to be ready, or there are some other issues, then yeah, kick the tires on everybody. I expect them to do their due diligence on all the guys that are remaining on the street. Somebody's going to come in here and add to that defensive line. They have to, right? I'm expecting it to be on the edge before the interior, but maybe it's on the interior as well. But when you talk about those two guys specifically, system fit becomes a bit of a question for me. And I think that if, again, Yannick is on the proper trajectory, that one will continue to make the most sense for me.
Danny, you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Bud Dupree to me is a 3-4 outside linebacker. I mean, he's had production in of the stops, but for me, Agba is a little bit, a little bit more curious. I mean, he played with Miami last year, but I think he also got hurt last year as well. So, and obviously I was a big Fangio defensive coordinated defense out there in Miami. So, I'd be interested in see what he has left. But I think Herb, I agree with you. I think Yannick would be the natural come in here, fit in here, and then obviously now you can spell him, give him some reps, give Austin Booker some reps, give DeMarcus Walker some reps on the outside, and kick Mark Walker inside potential as a 3 technique, and then you can use all different ways. But I think if you're gonna go get someone, Agua doesn't do anything for me. That's why he's still out there right now, right? Because he's a veteran who's coming off injuries as well. So I think I'd go Yannick just because, like I said, assuming his medical is all good. He's a guy you already know, and he knows the system already.
And you're talking about a completely different situation than it was 12 months ago, right? When you signed him 12 months ago, you're like, he needs to be a guy for us. He needs to really come in here and be that dude. Now, that's not the case. We're just asking you to come in here and, be a rotational guy, take advantage of the double teams that Montez is going to get. Like that's a different situation than when you were asking for him when you first signed him last year. And so now you're not saying, hey, can you come in here and get us, 10, 12 sacks. Now you're like, hey, can you come in here and, just add some consistent pressure? And maybe it turns out to 6, 7, 8 sacks or whatever, but Can you bring that consistent pressure? And I think if he's healthy, I think he should be able to do that.
Yeah, think about it. If he gets 5, if Booker gets 4, and then Walker gets 5, that's a good combination right there. And then obviously with Montez and whatever the young guys give you inside, I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Given the player personnel position that we're in at the defensive end position, that puts even more of an onus on those middle defensive tackles to get that inside pass rush and to help those defensive ends make play. Last question from the chat for you, Herb. Who do you think makes the biggest jump from last year to this year? Who's your breakout candidate?
It's a great question. I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I think it's Tyreek Stevenson. I think that he could just continues to excel, just continues to grow. His ability to accept the coaching, to digest information, and then not only that, but then to apply it on the field, right? A lot of guys are good in the classroom. A lot of guys can put the time in on the tape, but they still aren't able to translate. And you'll hear the coach say, oh, he's working his ass off in the building. He's in the film room. He's this. But on Sundays, you don't see it translate. You start to see it translate for Tyreek Stevenson. And that was really just my biggest concern with him coming in. I mean, he's got the size, he's got the long arms, he's got the ball skills, he's tough, comes up and run support. He's got all those things that you want in terms of the tangibles. I was worried about his intangibles when he first got here, and he proved throughout the year that intangibles aren't a concern with him either. He's going to put the work in. He wants to be great. It really matters to him. He's got great leadership in his room across the field with Jalen Johnson. I think that and he responded well to competition, right? They were pulling him a lot and putting Smitty in. Like Terrell Smith got a lot of reps, and they were starting to split time. I thought that might have been a thing that like made him go in the tank. Didn't responded well to those things. So I just expect another significant jump from him. Now, who they need to take the biggest jump is Javon. Right? That's who they need to take the biggest jump. But who I think is going to be is Tyreek.
So my guy is Zach Pickens. And I think because he's more that penetrator, that one gap guy that can get up the field and cause the pressure. If you're talking about creating pressure up the middle, I think he's the guy. Obviously, you saw Guerrero take that step, get a little better, towards the end of the year. But it seemed like Pickens, he had a couple plays, a couple flashes early in the season. Had a sack, I believe, week 1, week 2. And then we didn't hear anything from him. I think he's the one, if he steps up, he becomes that 3 technique that we've been talking about, that one gap penetrator. Now you're talking with Dexter getting better and him getting better and Montez and the young guys on the outside. Now you're talking about that front 4 becoming potentially, a wrecking machine out there in front.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of cross-trained those guys at some point, right? You were kind of seeing them both, which one was playing 1, which one was playing 3, and it's like, all right, what, like, either settle them in. I get why they were cross-training them, so I'm not really mad at the concept. But naturally, like you said, Danny, Zach is up the field. Like he's penetrating, and Javon is just this huge immovable object, right? And so he may be a better fit next to Zach. You know what I mean? And so I don't know that they had him in the right spots all the time, but I think it was cool to cross train him. I think they both continue to develop. But I'm with you on Zach's that initial burst. He gets up the field. Sometimes he gets up the field without looking. Like, you don't know where he's up the field. You don't know what's going on, though. Like the running back right there. But he does have that ability.
It's so funny that, there's been so much of an emphasis over the last several years with versatility for football players, and it comes at the time where the CBA has limited the amount of practices, so it makes it harder to be versatile because there's fewer practice time. And the other thing is, I'd love to throw Rashawn Johnson's name into that possibility of a breakout star. And, I like DeAndre Swift, but he's clearly not the number one answer, and he's not going to be used in, 3rd and 1 situations, I don't think, unless they're planning on passing. So I'd love to see Rashawn Johnson play at that level that we saw flashes of in 2023 and play at a more consistent level. And maybe by the end of the season, he's the running back with the most touches. Herb,
can I ask a question to you guys real quick?
Sure.
Why no Khalil Herbert love?
I love Khalil Herbert.
Whenever he's, again, maybe it's because of health, because he gets nicked up, banged up, and he misses some games. And I know that pass protection isn't great, but whenever he's given an opportunity, this guy produces. And I don't know why that he just always gets looked over, in my opinion.
I think he's the poster child of everything that's wrong, or at least challenging for running backs in the league right now in terms of how they're being devalued. Like I remember when they were first, some point, was it last year, where that was just a huge story about how devalued running backs were. And he came to his press conference, and I was like, this is all your fault, right? It's a double-edged sword for you, because the better he performs, the more he validates this, we don't have to invest highly in running backs. You got a 6th-round pick who came in and led the league in yards per carry. So it's like, you are the reason why nobody values running back. And so I think he kind of just gets caught up in that himself. But he does produce, man. He when he gets the ball, he's able to produce. Like you said, the pass pro is a bit of an issue or whatever, but he does produce. He's been doing it since he's been here. But everybody does kind of skip over him looking for the next best thing. But I think he's going to continue to be a valuable piece of what this offense wants to do.
And I think it's more because the philosophy is the running back position is going to be a revolving door of guys coming in every year to get a better value, a better bargain with the salary cap. And Khalil, in the old NFL, he would have been a top 10, top 12 running back and highly prized. But unfortunately, today's NFL is not that way. Herb, maybe sometime during the summer we can sit down. I'd love to do an hour show or so with you to just delve into your career, towards your personal story, because you've been an inspiration for a lot of young journalists. How do I get to be a Herb Howard is what I'm hearing now a lot of. So let's try to do that sometime during the summer months. And before you go, I do want you to plug your podcast, because I am telling you, I took a look at a couple of these episodes and I'm like cracking up. I'm like, this is great analysis, but it's also, the type of language that I grew up with in Chicago, and I bet a lot of our fans. Tell us about this podcast.
Yeah, it's Herb and Two, intellectual thuggery, because we have some high level conversations, but do it in a way that's easily digestible for people, hanging out on the front porch, hanging out on the back porch, like that kind of situation. And so we talk about a lot of issues that impact the Black community. And I don't plug it a whole lot on Twitter, because my Twitter stuff is mostly just about football, and this podcast has next to nothing to do with football. So I don't plug it too much on my Twitter, but it's really great conversation. I love my co-host Tucson Warren, and we have some really, really good conversations. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's funny. But we do tackle some pretty serious and heavy issues, and so just try to do it in a way that makes it as digestible as possible. Coming from where Tu and I come from, you want to be able to have these conversations at the highest level possible, but you don't want to talk over anybody's head in a way where it's not digestible. So that's what that podcast is about. Everybody's more than welcome to tune in, but don't expect any Bears analysis there, and you'll get to know another side of me, not different, just another side of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it, and it made me laugh. It made me think, and it's a great podcast. I think more people should be aware of it, and so that's why I was
I
anxious to
appreciate that.
promote it tonight for you. The other
Appreciate
thing
that.
before you go, Herb, is um, I lost my thought. Either way, I really enjoy your work. Tell us. Oh, I remember. Tell us about the Bigs. People are always asking me, so who does he work for? What? He's a beat reporter, but for who is sometimes?
Yeah.
No, it's the Bigs. Tell us about the Bigs.
Yeah, man. The Bigs media started, I want to say, in like 2014. Terrence Tomlin and Eugene McIntosh founded the Bigs. Eugene covers the Cubs, Terrence covers the Sox, and they've just done so many phenomenal things, man. They've got, one-on-one interviews, in the Cubs World Series clubhouse. They just did like Ricketts, and like they've done so much cool things. MLB.com gave them the credit that they deserved for nicknaming Javier Baez El Mago. They came up with that nickname. And so when
Awesome.
the MLB.com did like the 50 greatest nicknames, I think he was number one, and they, properly credited the Bigs for doing that. But they really just two great dudes, man, from Chicago that love sports, know sports very well, very passionate about it, very passionate about the city, and very passionate about giving people like myself an opportunity to cover these teams in a way that, growing up on the south and west sides of Chicago, we didn't really get to see them covered that way. And they do really, really good job. And so I'm very, very grateful to them for giving me an opportunity. It was something that I was kind of covering on my own and kind of doing my own thing. And then I met them in 2019 or 2020. And during the pandemic season, we would do a show we called the Kickoff Kickback, like 10 to 12 before the games. And after that, they were like, towards the end of that season, they were like, yo, what would you think about, covering the Bears from us? I guess they liked the way my knowledge of the game and the way I was able to communicate it to the masses. And so they were like, what do you think about doing that? And I was like, don't play with me like that, man. Like, don't, you know what I mean? Like, let's not play like that. And so I just kind of brushed it off. And, shortly before training camp, sometime the Bears, went through their process and sent all my credentials through. And, this will be my fourth season. And I just, try to get a little bit better, try to add a little bit more to, my own bag, my own toolbox each year. And, just try to add something to the beat. And I know, some people appreciate that, and I'm grateful that they do. People show a lot of love, and I try to reciprocate that love right back. And I try to just be like the same person, man. I think being just authentic is very, very important to me, man. I get a little bit more access to the Bears than most people, but other than that, I don't think that I'm, a bigger fan or all that much more knowledgeable. And like the work, Danny, you do, like I all that draft shit, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Like,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
like,
Appreciate it.
you be having 1,000 prospects down packed. Like, no, we finna get 4 of these motherfuckers. Like, no.
I love it.
I've been a draft nerd since I was a kid, man. I love that stuff. I don't know. I just gravitated to it. I was Mel Kiper and all that crap, man. That's what I love, that shit.
That was the first thing I can remember doing when I used to sit. Because remember, it used to come on Saturdays and Sundays. It wasn't this primetime Thursday night thing. It came on Saturdays and Sundays, and I would just wake up. And I still got the notebooks. Actually, I would just write the draft down, like every pick, each pick, which player, school they came from, position, who drafted them, all those types of things. I would just write it down. I got several notebooks just one notebook, but several pages of that. And so, yeah, I feel you on that, man. But I really appreciate the background work that you do on all of that, man. It'd be so
Thank
good.
you.
So, Leah, I don't view myself as like, being all that better or more knowledgeable. I just get a little bit more access. I appreciate that access. I try to do the best I can with it. But other than that, man, I just try to show up and be a regular dude from the South Side of Chicago. I try to just be who I am, right? So as a black man, there's minimal representation in this industry. I walk in that room every day. I'm often, the only black person, or maybe one of two, right? And so I try to be as authentic as possible in that role, because I don't want to be seen as this like exceptional Negro. I don't want to seem that, like, I don't want anybody to think like I'm from 71st and Jeffrey, and I don't want anybody to think I'm something exceptional. I'm just like everybody else that's from 71st and Jeffrey, right? We are capable of these things if we can get in these rooms. And So I make sure I wear my Jordans and my hoodies, and I got a tattoo on my neck, and you know what I mean. I walk a certain way, I talk a certain way, and when it's time for me, you know, to speak a certain way or dress a certain way, I will. But as much as I can, I try to just show up as authentic as possible, man.
We do a great job. We do a great job.
Indeed. That's so important. You know, we need representation from all areas, from all diverse opinions, you know, and diversity comes in lots of different shapes and sizes. And so I'm glad that the Chicago Bears have started to make steps in that direction to open up the locker room and the press conferences to people from diverse backgrounds. And you do a phenomenal job. I think that the first time I noticed you in a press conference and say, "What? That's a new voice," you know, and I like the balls of that question was when you asked George McCaskey about the search committee for the next GM or something, and you said something about why not younger people because you had Napoleon on, and I say, yeah, why not younger people?
It needed some fresh eyes on some of these perspectives, man, and it was just like, okay, we keep running that script back, and it's not. Right. It's not really working. You know, all due respect to Bill Polian and everything he's done, and
absolutely,
you know, everybody else they brought in to try and, you know, fill that mediator role or, you know, consult role, like, you know.
I hear you. Well, listen, as David Hall said at the end of tonight's Football Night in Chicago episode, it's a fun time to cover the Chicago Bears. Really and you are our leading guy in getting us the information and getting it in a way that we find very pleasing because you're asking a lot of questions that we're thinking about, but you're articulating them very, very well. Herb, you're the absolute best. Thank you for spending so much time with us.
I appreciate y'all so very, very much, man. I'm looking forward to come back. Y'all just let me know, man. I'm absolutely thrilled to be on here. I've followed y'all work for a long time, and I appreciate being on.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Herb.
Good
night. He is the man, Herb Howard. Man,
that's awesome.
I love these stories of people, you know, the Greg Bragg story. You know, Greg is now a main part of CHGO. And I remember going to the Bears-Rams game with him. He was doing some work. He had his own podcast here at the Barroom Network. And listening to his perseverance, you know, this is what I want to do. This is, you know, the bricklaying thing, you know, it pays the bills and stuff. And I like who I work with. Man, what I want to do was like be another Mike North. I remember him saying be another Mike North because Mike North sold hot dogs and then moved into sports radio and had a legendary career. And so Rags is headed that way. Herb is headed that way. And Danny, you're headed that way too. With all the kudos that you're getting from everyone in the draft room, in the chat room, it is phenomenal. All right. So let's start to wrap things up here. Again, I want to look at the draft prospects and get from you expectations. Maybe even go out on a limb and tell me 3,000 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, or whatever. We'll start, of course, with the first round pick, first overall, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, here I'm talking about not putting too much pressure on the kid. I'm going to come on here and put some crazy numbers out here. But no, I mean, I'm going to try and keep it realistic, right? And we talked about it. You and I talked about it before Herb come on and talked about it a little bit with Herb in terms of Shane Waldren. You know, Shane, it's up to you, man. We're watching you and seeing how you go ahead and design this offense around him. Now, obviously, with the potential firepower and obviously DJ Moore, Roman Dunze, and Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, and Joe Everett, and all these guys. I mean, I want to be conservative, but I also don't want to, sell the kid short as well. I mean, like I said on the draft show, he's probably, the most talented natural thrower of the football the Bears have had since Jay Cutler, in my opinion. So, I mean, if we're going to say the offensive line is going to stand up and he's going to get protection and all that stuff, I mean, I could see him throwing for 3,200 yards, and I'm being conservative here, and what 27, between 27 and 28, 29 touchdowns, something like that. So the biggest thing that he has to work on, in my opinion, is obviously his ball security. Or one of the biggest things is ball security. He had 33 fumbles, I believe, in his career in college. That's something that he's going to have to learn to cherish the football here in the NFL. So I'd say between 3,000 to 3,200 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, and let's say 11 interceptions is my conservative numbers for him.
I like that. Regarding the fumble thing, you've seen the tape, and so you see him running around in the pocket with the ball extended,
Yeah,
like that. And that, of course,
we call it scouting, holding it like a loaf of bread.
there you go.
Yeah.
And in today's NFL, that's a recipe for disaster because you're going to get a lot of guys swiping at that ball. They don't care about you because they can't catch you. So they're going to swipe that ball and knock it out. But at the same time, I think, and I'm no quarterback expert here, but I think at the same time, holding the ball out there is partly why he makes these phenomenal off-balance throws, because he just there's a very short windup because he's already got it out there.
He's got an elite release. His release is elite, and that's one of the things I put in my scouting report. You can see him running around for 4 yards, whatever, 10 seconds with the ball down here, and next thing he'll find a receiver downfield and he'll just whip it, and he whip it 40, 50 yards on the field on the run, and it's accurate. And he throws for anticipation, and that's the things you see. Those are the wow plays you see on his tape, and scouting Caleb. Those are things you see. I mean, you just can't help but see him, and I think that's the thing that gives him that confidence to be able to do it. But with the NFL, like I said, these guys are bigger, faster. These defensive ends, these linebackers are going to come after him, and the first thing they're going to do, they're going to strike for that ball. So he could run, maybe have two hands on the ball, or have it secure somehow, and then just but he's got to find a way to just hold on to the football. And that's the main thing there.
Yeah. Now I'm a fan. You're a scout, so. This is kind of a weird question for me. One of the things that I'm most looking forward to, of course, first and foremost, is his play in the field. But the other thing is like the off the field stuff, because we know the story that he brings to the Chicago Bears and to the NFL. We know he's talking about he's seeking immortality. We know that as an NIL college football player, he broke records for the amount of money that he made. How much are you concerned about the persona that he presents, or are you excited about seeing this evolution in a Chicago Bears player, a young athlete entering the NFL is a better way of putting it? Are you excited about seeing the evolution and seeing a guy take control like this?
Well, that's the one thing that we've seen from Caleb. Anything after post-draft, we've seen him being affable, him being personable, him being open and joking and laughing, and being a guy that you can easily root for, right? And whether it's texting all the draft picks after they've been selected, telling the punter you don't have to worry about punting here, that's the kind of stuff that leaders and faces of franchise do. Him and Jalen Johnson squashing that whole Hollywood thing, that was key. I think he's got to first and foremost win the locker room. He's got to come in and show to his teammates that, hey, I can be reliable. I'm a guy that's going to work hard. I'm going to come in here, first guy in, last guy out. That's the old motto, and just prove that to his teammates. Once his teammates see his talents on the field, they're going to be like, all right, yeah, this guy can do it. So, but he's got to win them over. And then the couple of things that knocks that during the season, or actually prior to the season, that was about Caleb was his on the field body language stuff. And then we're going back to the days of Jay Cutler. Remember the whole body language and all that. Like, you can't have that slumping and just like down demeanor on the bench. And like, you want to see a guy that it's obviously if you're having a bad game, obviously, like I said, they're smiling, joking, all that stuff. But again, you want to see him engage with his teammates and just maybe working with his coaches. And as long as we don't see that slump over shoulder and just that scowl or that bad body language, I think that's all that matters. But most importantly, right now, and he's off to a great start. Every interview he says, I want to get to know everybody in the organization, from the front office, for the secretaries, everybody, right? The people working in lunchrooms and all that stuff, and his teammates and their family. And that's great. And if that happens, I think he's going to kind of blend in nice and neat in that locker room. It is a relatively young locker room, right? And so I think he's going to fit right in there. And I think just as long as he doesn't come in with that model, I'm the number one pick and you guys owe me, blah blah. I think he'll fit nicely. And so far, whatever we've seen in public, I have no problems with it.
I totally agree. He seems like he's a very authentic person, and I hope that isn't a lie.
Because it's excitement to be drafted number one was authentic. Yeah. I felt it. Like him and Roman Dunze, getting that whole thing going there, that connection there. I think that felt it, right? That felt genuine. Then it felt like it was made up or it was Hollywood or anything like that. Right. The kid really wanted to be a number one overall pick, and I don't think it mattered. Again, this is some things with Caleb, right? The whole thing with oh, he's going to push his way to Washington. Well, that was never the case. Right? So the one thing again, reports and stuff like, when he met with Brian Poles and company, he was interviewing them as much as they were interviewing him, meaning he was telling them, what are you going to do to help support me, blah, blah, which I like, because that puts the onus back on the organization. Hey, if you don't support this guy, he's not going to be like, all right, I'm just on a contract because I'm happy here. He could up and leave if he's not happy in terms of what you're doing. So I think that puts pressure on, kind of like I quit. Maybe it's not a fair comparison, but maybe equate to what LeBron does in the NBA in terms of signing these contracts and putting the pressure on the front office to always put him in a position to compete and to win. I think Caleb could do something like that as well.
A lot of interesting comments in the chat room, and basically saying that it was Jay Cutler's arrogance that was his downfall, and other people saying, well, it was the Bears organization that was his Cutler's downfall. I think there's truth in both
I think it's a combination, right? I think it's a combination, because obviously arrogance is part of Jay Cutler's his demeanor, right? And I think also, for the trade that Jerry Angelo made, that what he gave up, I think just saying, hey, we got the quarterback now, we're good. It also was an organizational failure, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah. So the good news, it appears, is that Caleb Williams is authentic in his leadership. He's not handing out a bunch of BS. As he told one of the reporters on draft night, when he was asked, how is this going to be different, his response was, because I care. And that is huge. And so you mix in an athlete who cares, you mix in a will to win, and you mix in a athletic talent along with supporters, teammates, I should say, of people who are going to help you become the best at that position. That's a recipe for success. And I think Ryan Post deserves credit for that, at least so far. So,
and he will be tested too. I mean, there's going to be bad games. There's going to be 3 interception games where he fumbles the ball, and he's going to be tested. Whether it's the media, whether it's the fans on Twitter, and that how he responds to that, how he bounces back from that is what we have to kind of monitor and see.
Great question here from 10G. Is the fact that Williams did not play in a pro style offense, is that going to be a potential problem for Williams? What do you think?
It's the same office Kyler Murray played in, same office Jalen Hurts played in, same office Baker Mayfield played in. So far, it hasn't really been a problem for those guys, right? So I think, while it's not a pro style system, it's more of an, if you were like an air raid stuff, but I think some of the concepts are some, in terms of going to progressions, in terms of, there's one read here, go here. And I think that, and again, Shane Waldren, right? I keep saying his name, but take some of that stuff, take some of the things he's comfortable with, whether it's the Lincoln Riley offense, and maybe bring it in and say, all right, let's put this in there. This could be one of your plays here. Well, Shane Waldron may have never called that before in the past, but you have a quarterback now who's been in that system for 3 years. Bring something that he likes and then maybe incorporate that concept. So again, this is talking about building that system around your quarterback.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's move into our next player. I want to get your thoughts on expectations for the number 9th overall pick in the NFL draft, Rome Odunze.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the guy that I was pining for at number 9, and I absolutely love this kid and everything he brings. Talk about football character, talk about work ethic, talk about being a big playmaker on the football field, and for me, in terms of expectation, obviously, the question now is, there's a lot of mouths to feed on this Bears offense, right? We kind of went over that list there with the tight ends and the running backs and receivers. If he comes in and has, say, 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, I think some might be disappointed, but I think that would be a solid season for a guy that's going to be, eventually stepping up his game. Because I believe that Keenan Allen is just a one and done here, and he's going to move on. And I think then Rome moves in as the number 2, and then now we see him and DJ being that 1-2 complement to each other. I think that's where you're going to go from there. But if he comes in with 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, I think that's a pretty solid, good season. Some might expect 1,000 yards, and he might go and perform that. But I don't want to put high expectations on a guy, so I want to underpromise and have him over deliver.
I love that type of thinking, and I'll add to this is another huge quality that he's bringing is just his personality, his demeanor, his willingness to sacrifice to be the best, his downfield blocking, all of those things that we look outside of the stat sheet is can we win with this guy? Is he a leader? I've always taken the approach, Danny, and I'm sure, I'm not the only one, but you put players into a column and you give them a check mark is, can he help us win a Super Bowl? And then the other column is, can he help us be competitive? And basically, you got to get check marks on those two. The third column is he just a body,
Right.
And so what I see with all of these draft picks, but with Rome particularly, is that he is on those two left columns, and the first one being he can help us win a Super Bowl. He's
And that's a
definitely
great point, Aldo. And that's something that I brought up on my scouting report. But a lot of things that goes by when talking about Roman Dunze is all the the stats and the big plays. But he is one of the better, if not the best, downfield blocker from the receiver position in this draft class. And he's a guy that goes out there and he locks out, he sustains and he maintains his blocks downfield. So that's something that gets overlooked a lot. But yeah, he is one of the the better blockers in this draft class. So you're getting that as well at the next level. How many times we see, was it St. Brown or whoever, or was it Darnell Mooney, that they kept trying to do that crack black, back block on the defensive line, and the guy was like, get out of here, like push him off the side. And Roman Dunze, it's not going to happen. And he's going to be out there. He's going to go. Even Keenan Allen, he's just slight of he's a guy that can go in there. He can put his nose in there as well. So I think they've improved their blocking downfield as well in the receiver group.
It's a great makeup there. On one of the radio talk shows here in Chicago today, TJ Hushmanzada, I think it was the Parkins and Spiegel show, TJ Hushmanzada count Roma Odunze with Megatron, Calvin Johnson. Is that hyperbole from a guy who helped Roma Odunze train? Or could you see Roma Odunze become a Megatron type talent?
I don't think. See, my confirm was Devontae Adams, and that was a guy that, again, the body control, the being able to reel it in from either side or over his shoulder, just the concentration, the ability to sink his hips and separate on these quick hitting rope routes and other stuff like that. So that's what I saw with Megatron. He's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's a guy that I don't see him as that type of, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie, he ran about a 4.3 40, if I'm not mistaken, Megatron, coming out of Georgia Tech.
That's what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he gave that. No, I'm not ever gonna say he can't become that, but I just, for me, a more realistic, kind of comp was it Devontae Adams, or maybe even like a poor man like Allen. His floor is like an Allen Robinson type of comp, but his ceiling being like that Devontae Adams, which, and I'm a couple of my buddies text me after the draft, said, what do you think? I'm like potentially the Bears just got their Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams connection. Because that's the thing. Caleb throws the ball to a certain spot with anticipation, and with his body control, his hands, his ability to separate from his extend his arms and catch away from his frame, and that's what. And in terms of his competitiveness, in terms of going up and making catches on those balls, there was an interview with Rome and Caleb, and someone asked Caleb, he's not a 50-50 guy. Caleb's like, oh, he's 75-20. He goes, no, he's 100 to 0. That's what he is. Yeah. He goes up and he wants that football every time it's in his vicinity. So that's the kind of guy you're getting.
Yeah. Jeff says he's bigger than Devontae, but it's a good comp. Hushmanzada turned down comps to multiple players because of size. Said Larry Fitz is the closest comp, but Rome is faster. So, Jeff, I think I might have gotten that wrong. I didn't hear the interview. I kind of surmised it from a X post, but nonetheless, the guy comps to some really good players, and so can't wait to see him out on the football field and have a big role early and then often for many, many years to come.
And he's wearing the number of a guy that you could also probably comp him to is Marshall as well.
Yeah, Brandon Marshall. Absolutely.
He's a little bit more, I think, a little more twitchier than Marshall in terms of, could create a little bit more separation, but in terms of physicality at the catch point, a guy that can block downfield. Brandon Marshall, and he's wearing his number, so that's another comp there you can think about too.
Good stuff. Kiran, I think Amagadeshi. I think I have more difficulty with his first name than his last name. You and I talked passionately about this choice. What do you think a couple of days or a few days after the draft about the big offensive lineman from Yale?
Yeah, he's a guy that obviously you see that size at 6'5", 323 with that 36 and a 1/8 arm length and the big hands. And I mean, he's a guy that scouting him at Cornell. I mean, I've got obviously the level of competition is you have to kind of factor that in as well. But guy that shows some physicality at the line of scrimmage, guy shows some nastiness, and a guy that can shows the feet, the athletic ability to kind of get to his set spots and again lock out with those long arms and kind of hold on, strong grip. So he shows some really impressive, intriguing stuff. And he had the injury, only played 4 games last year. And even Ryan Pohl said, that he's more like a projectional, like kind of player, a future player. So that was my question in terms of, how does this guy help you next year? Maybe he's just a backup. Maybe he's a swing tackle. Maybe, he has right guard experience. So maybe he can find a spot in guard. But we talked about earlier, I don't know if he's built to be a guard. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, if we talk about, with Herb in terms of Braxton Jones, this is a year where, he's going to have to step up. And, the first couple of years, up and down. This is the year. If you don't, to potentially have your replacement here already on the roster in that 3rd round pick. So he's definitely a guy I think they kind of bring in for the future. But another good point I heard brought up, I want to say is no one expected Braxton Jones to be your starter week 1. He was a 5th round pick, out of a smaller conference, small school. So, who's to say that this kid doesn't come in and take someone's job also? So I wouldn't put it past him. And obviously the passion he shows, a local kid who grew up a Bears fan, I think that only helps. And that also kind of puts that some of the more intrigue around the guy as well. But yeah, for me, he's probably going to be someone that's going to, in the show, have to be kind of, in my expectation, he's going to be a backup, maybe a guard, maybe a tackle, but eventually he's a guy that could come in and take a starting spot from someone.
Do you have an idea who's going to be tight end number 3? I just, digressing here for a moment because I saw Bob's question, and I'm not quite sure who's the leading candidate right now.
They have that kid Carlson on I think the practice squad, so I'm not sure if he's the candidate, but that's another spot where do you want to bring in a traditional Y inline blocking tight end? I assume they would, right? Because right now only one that could do inline would be Cole Kmet. Jared Everett's not really someone that you could line up inline, but he's not someone that really excels there. So I think that's another position where you can maybe see someone, a veteran who's still out there, a guy who kind of specializes in blocking, kind of come in here, later on, right before camp starts.
It's interesting because I was thinking about Jesper Horsted earlier this morning, but the thing about Jesper is that he's moved from the tight end position to a wide receiver. Now he can actually move back, but he's not really what this team needs. It's like Danny said, you need a big body, like bring in Mercedes Lewis back. That would be very, very helpful.
May I ask you what made you think about Jesper Horsted this morning?
I don't know. I think I was.
Do I want to know?
Yeah, probably not. No, I was looking through free agency lists and saw him on there, and I think it was Spotrac or Over the Cap had him listed as a wide receiver. Now that could be a mistake. Either way, I mean, he played wide receiver at
Harvard. Yeah, I thought it was Harvard.
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah, one of the Ivy schools. Yeah.
Anyway, all right, let's move on with our next guy. Here's a pick that people are still arguing and probably will be until he either shanks a punt or kicks one 99 yards, and that's Tory Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously the initial, when the non-pick was announced, I was an initial shock, but I mean, this was a guy that they were talked about prior to the draft, going in a 4th, 5th round range. So it's not like he got overdrafted, in my opinion. And he was talked about as a punter. I mean, as a weapon. He's a guy that can get offenses inside the 20-yard line. And I think for a defensive-minded head coach who wants to make the opposing offense work their way down the full football field instead of getting quick 30, 40, 50, 60-yard drives, I think this makes total sense for them, right? And I think it also was a position where obviously they weren't happy with Trenton Gill, and they ended up cutting him today. So I think this was something where they saw an upgrade. It was a 4th round pick, and I also something that we later turned out like they already had in mind that they were going to go ahead and try and move up and acquire another extra pick to go get an Austin Booker. So I think they figured if they passed on him this point, this is all me kind of kind of thinking for them, right? It's if they pass on him, Taylor, that is, at that pick, and then try to make a move back into the draft to get him, he might have been gone by then. I think that's what they were fearing. So they went and picked him and moved back and got a guy that I absolutely love in Austin Booker.
A lot of people are just remarking on his size. Look at these numbers. 6'3", almost 6'4", 223 pounds. I mean, this guy is going to make some tackles, isn't he?
Yeah, he loves tackling. That's the thing. He loves to tackle, and so he's a big guy. He's Australian. A lot of the Australian punters, typically have good success here in the NFL. So I think it's interesting to see how he comes up. Now, the only one thing is, and I liked about it was, he's kicked in bad conditions. You're not going getting a kicker from Miami or a kicker from Cal and asking him to come kick in Soldier Field. He's kicked in Iowa with snowstorm, rain, wind conditions. So I think that's something that you have to factor in as well, that he's going to come in and not be like kind of shell shocked by what happens, in terms of the climates around him.
You like to kid around that every time we've gone to the Senior Bowl, I'm over there hanging out with the punters and kickers and taking a look at them. But I remember the year that we went down and Wisniewski was down there, who's down with the 49ers, and seeing some of his punts, and I'm going like, wow, that looks like a shank or something. And the reason why is that he was trying different things. He was, like a golfer, he was working on bending the ball. He was working on different things. And that's one of the reasons Ryan Post fell in love with him, is because his ability to work the ball like golfers do with their golf ball on shots, and also make the ball stop like almost on a dime. And so that's pretty exciting, because how many times have we seen that punt go into the end zone or that shank? And if this guy is anywhere near as advertised, we've got a good one, no matter where.
Yeah, even some punters, I know they work on making the ball kind of nosedive right into the ground, so when it bounces, it just kind of rolls and you get more yards as well. So the only other thing I'm concerned about is, and I don't know this, and maybe some of the maybe Tooch, if you're listening, or some Iowa fans can help me out here. Has he ever held? Because obviously Gill was a holder for Carlos Santos, so that's going to be, if he takes over.
Yeah. I saw some photographs of him. In fact, the photograph I was going to use for that graphic that I just had was him holding, and I said, "Well, I have him holding. He's a punter." So I found a good punting shot. So don't know how often he's done it, but he has done it at the college level. Somebody posted a question here, and I think I forgot to save it. Oh, here it is. Aunt Mass. How soon can we get Taylor to start punting at Soldier Field and face that wind? Yeah, Danny, you've been to Soldier Field. You've seen other professional football games. How tough is it for a punter at Soldier Field compared to other places?
Yeah, punters, kickers. I mean, I still remember vividly that 49ers game, I believe was was it that Lovie Smith era, or when the Vasher went back there and returned that field goal attempt for a touchdown. So yeah, I mean, when the conditions get crazy, it gets crazy down there, and you see some weird things happen. So in terms of when he's going to get down there, I assume, I don't know if they're going to family night. During training camp is probably the first time he's actually going to be down there to actually punt. But that's going to be summertime. Is it really that crazy in terms of the conditions? I think we'll probably, once you get into the winter and then probably maybe, because it wasn't Santos or one of the kickers being shipped down to Soldier Field to kick during the week.
That was Cody Parkey.
Because
he was having all those doinks during this. We all tried. And they were actually like one day, because he complained about the traffic going to Soldier Field to go practice there, they got a chopper and choppered him over. But yeah, I would think that the important thing is yes, number one, the wind, but you're never going to fully conquer the wind, because it's going to swirl, and you're going to see the flag blowing that way, but it blows this way, and then during the ball, when it's on the air, it's going to go that way. So it's an almost unpredictable thing. But yeah, he needs that experience. But the other big thing, Danny, is the turf, because he wants to see how the ball's going to bounce. He wants to see how he can get that ball to stop as soon as it lands. So that's huge. All right, moving on to our. Take care of that. Moving on to our last draft pick, a guy that Denny has talked about numerous times throughout the season here on Draft on Tap, and that is Austin Booker. Take it away, Denny.
Yeah. Obviously, I like I said, I've talked to him multiple times. It really caught my eye down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, and this guy was just unblockable. And again, he's another 21 years old, developing. So he's a guy that I don't foresee a huge role for him next year. But I do see him maybe coming in and just by sheer motor, sheer athletic ability, length, the first step quickness, and the way he plays with a reckless abandon. I could see him getting on the field and getting some snaps. And if he produces, he can be a situational pass rusher. He's not yet up there to, in my opinion, to put a hand in the ground, be a full-time defensive end, but third and long or second and long, and obvious passing situations, you can probably bring him in part of the rotation. And if he gives you 4 sacks, and DeMarcus Walker gives you 6, and if you bring in like a veteran like Yannick Ngakoue, he gives you 7. Now you have a productive defensive end, opposite of, if you collect all those guys, opposite of Montez Sweat. So maybe you don't have the one guy, but you maybe have a like a rotation, kind of like the running back committee back there, and kind of have a pass rush committee there too. And I just see the way this guy plays, and they already love his athletic ability, they love his length. I think he's going to see action. I think Herb brought something that I've been talking about a couple of years in terms of Dominic Robinson. He's a guy that 5th round pick. Unfortunately just hasn't worked out for him. He hasn't had any much production. I think he's a guy this guy Booker can come in and take that role and be that guy that comes in on certain downs. And again, if he gives you 5, 6, 7 sacks, that's a heck of a a rookie campaign. And now you start building on that, right? Get him stronger, get him to a point where he's a down on and down out, hand in the ground defensive end.
3-point asked earlier in the show, Brennan Jackson or Austin Booker? Who would you
Austin
have
Booker.
preferred?
Austin
Tell us
Booker.
why.
Austin Booker, well, he's younger, and he's Brennan Jackson has done in terms of been through a lot of injuries. He's I think 5th or 6th year senior. They both play with a great motor, and they both have a good first step quickness. But I just love the determination, the bend that Austin Booker has, the length that Austin Booker has. Jackson doesn't have the length that Booker has as well. So I think Booker for me would be the he's more of a gamble because he's a younger player. Jackson's got more of a resume, if you will. But I think just the Booker, the way he saw, I can always people got the Senior Bowl, the way he was unblockable and that motor and that athletic ability and that bend. Austin Booker for me. It's a bigger gamble, but I think it's a bigger potential to pay off down the road.
Yeah, let's hope that Booker contributes with special teams. I'd like to see him out there because of his length and athletic ability, primarily. Brian asked a question that I actually was going to do some research on, never got around to it. He asked, do you foresee any big-name defensive tackles or ends becoming available? Because we are coming up with this wave now of players potentially being cut because the team says, we're going to go with the rookies that we drafted. Your contract is too much, and so post-June 1st designation, you're out the door. I didn't get a chance to research it. Does anyone come off the top of your head that might be a potential cut?
Well, I don't know about a cut, but some of that might be available. And we just kind of touched on today was Jonathan Allen from Washington. With George, with Johnny Newton over there now, and Deron Payne, and they've got some other players that they've invested in. I don't know if he's an ideal fit in that Dan Quinn up the field, kind of scheme. So I think he's a guy that potentially could be available. Now, obviously, you have to give up a draft pick for him or some sort of compensation to acquire him, and the whole contract and all that's how it's going to work in terms of cap hit, all that stuff that I haven't got into. But I think that's one name that I keep an eye on because I was kind of go through in the draft and just trying to see where did a team kind of overfill on one spot or another. And I think Washington was one of the teams that caught my eye. In terms of edge guys, I really can't think of any. Nothing comes off the top of my head, but just have to do some more kind of looking into these teams and seeing all right, which team, for example, the Rams went ahead, got I think 4 players on their defensive line, right? Four different defensive players. So Brent Jackson was one of them. Jared Verse was another one. Frisk from Florida State was another one as well. So, but the Rams, I don't think, obviously losing Aaron Donald, I don't think they have anyone there that they would get rid of. Obviously, they already lost, some other players as well. So I just you got to go through and see what happens, what shakes out. But some players going to get traded or released in the next couple months, and if the Bears are willing to be participants there, I think you can get a nice good player there.
Do you think that Allen is worthy of a first-round draft pick or second-round draft pick?
Third-round pick is how I would go. I'll start with a third, and they're probably going to ask for a second. But I would try and hold on to that second and try maybe a third and maybe a third and a fourth or maybe 2/3 or something like that, in back-to-back years, whatever it is you're going to do, because eventually you're going to get a comp pick for, I'm assuming, Keenan Allen if they're leaves. Ian Cunningham is only a matter of time before he gets a GM job. You're going to get 2 comp picks there, 2 third-round comp picks there. So if you play with 2 third-round picks there, you can produce a trade for someone like Jonathan Allen that could potentially work.
I love hypothetical questions, and Eric's got one for you. He says, say that Brendan Rice and Taj Washington both do not make it to the final 53, and their teams try to sneak him onto the practice squad roster. If the Bears were to offer either a practice squad spot or just pilfer them off their roster, which one of those receivers would you prefer, Danny?
Geez, Eric, I think you know that I love both these receivers, right? And they're both different types of receivers. Brendan Rice, that bigger 6'2", 200, potential physical kind of receiver. For me, he's got some of that extra gear, that second gear when he's in downfield in phase and the ball's thrown his way, and you see him kind of separate, get that over top leverage. But Taj Washington is more of that diminutive, smaller, 5'7", 5'9". But he's also physical, and he's a guy that goes up and attacks the ball. And we saw him in the East-West Shrine practices, and obviously Taj Washington and Caleb have had this big relationship. But in terms of on the football field, but for me, I I just Brendan Rice, and it would be the guy I'd pick because of that size, because of the physicality. And I would just I want a guy like that who wants to football all the time, and I think it's a guy that might be kind of chasing his dad's name there as well, and trying to have something to prove there too. So that would be something like I think he went to the Chargers in the 7th round, which I was shocked. Even Greg Gabriel, we were talking on that draft show on Saturday, he was shocked that he was still on the board. So not sure why he went to the 7th round. I know the biggest knock on him, on Brendan Rice, was separation. Doesn't create much separation, but he's a guy that, again, that can catch through contact. He's a guy that can make plays on the football field. And he's a former track runner as well. So between those two, I love both those guys, but I'd go with the bigger size guy at Brendan Rice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have to say that there are going to be some interesting wide receiver drops during this offseason. So I could see the Bears delving into that, whether it's during the OTAs or during camp or just before the season when the 53-man rosters are set. There's going to be some receivers there. And the Bears, like Danny said a number of times, the Bears need to get 2 wide receivers. Well, they got one in Rome Dunze, but that second one is still out there. That should be on this roster, hopefully.
Not that they're going to find this guy, but a guy like Zay Jones just got cut, by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know what his health condition is and all that stuff, but some of that, with a guy come in and be a 4th receiver, maybe a 5th receiver. And we don't need number 1 and number 2 anymore. We're not even number 3 anymore. We got 3 those guys. We need number 4s and number 5s now, right? So so that's a guy like that. Those are the kind of guys you're going to see cut loose here.
Yep. Gosh, some of us remember the time.
Remember we had Byron Pringle and Dante Pettis, and we were trying to make Devin Hester a number receiver for the longest time.
It's just so embarrassing. We've entered a new world. Sin N says, do you prefer Pose's upgrade? Do you think Pose upgrades at left tackle? We talked about that a little bit, but I think this offensive line is done. They're going to roll with these guys unless a surprising name becomes available. Then, of course, you're going to change plans. But this thing is set. Don't you think, Danny?
Yeah, I think for the most part, and especially I think left tackle, I think Ryan Poles has shown his faith in Braxton Jones, and I have faith in him as well. And like I said, I think this is his make or break year. He's going to have to take that next step and be more consistent, right? And so I think left tackle, if anything, maybe they'll fish around at guards, but I know they brought in some veterans there that can be some quality depth. So we'll see what happens there. But I think left tackle, it's going to be Braxton Jones. And I think if this year we still have some of what we've seen in the past, which is up and down games and some really bad misses and bad whiffs, and I think that might be the end for Braxton Jones. That might be why Kieran was a 3rd round pick from Yale.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the chat any final questions for Danny before we close this final episode of this season on Draft Down Tap. I've got 1 or 2 more for Danny. Danny, the schedule for the Bears is supposed to be announced, I think, May 10th, around there. I think that was Greg's speculation. So very soon. How important is the schedule in today's NFL? 17-game regular season, 1 week off, the one international game the Bears are going to play. How important is that? Because I'm not going to make a prediction of how many wins or losses. I want to see the schedule first, and then I'll make my preliminary prediction, which is always 17-0. And then once after, just before the season, then I'll make my real prediction after having seen how camp and preseason games go. But when this schedule is announced, what is it that you'll be looking for most?
Well, I mean, for me, what I look for is, are they on any national TV games? And if they're on national TV games, then that the networks expect the Bears to be good. And are there any short weeks, right? And if there are short weeks, where are they? Where's the buy at, right? Because if the last couple of years has been kind of later on in the season. If you don't want it too early in the season, but also you don't want it too late in the season, right? But you want it to come somewhere in between. So those are the things I look for in terms of which team comes where. I really don't look at that because, everything changes. Every year we see teams go from last to first, teams you thought were going to be good or suck, teams you thought were going to be horrible or good, like the Texans last year, right? The Texans were one of the worst teams. Had the number 2 overall pick, coming into last year. And then look at them, what they did last year. So you just can't tell from year to year. It's a different game. So my main thing is, where's the buy at? Are they on national TV? How many times are on national TV? And then is there a bump in the road where you have, like 3 out of 4 games are on the road, or maybe there was one time that I think like something crazy like 4 games in a row on the road. And I think that year Nagy had like, what was it, back-to-back Thursday night games, which is a little bit of a rarity as well. So, like some of the quirks in the schedule is what I look for. But in terms of seeing that and say, oh, okay, we start at home, good, that's a win. You can't do that. You just got to see what the teams are and how they go and play. Trust me, we all made those predictions on Before 55 last year, and we were trying to burn them by week 2. So I think we learned our lesson. I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, we'll see, because Before 55 will be back with a listen by
John's fault. Gets a little hyped up, and the vein gets popping, and we're like, win.
Yeah, exactly. He start believing his buffonisms. But he's been negative on the team for a long time, and now there's an upward positive trend, like it is for most Bears fans. There are still some Bears fans out there who are like, I'll believe it when I see it, and I can't blame them for feeling that way. Final question for you is, what are your expectations for the Chicago Bears? Is this a playoff season for us? Can I start saving up for a playoff ticket?
Well, I'm one of those let's wait and see kind of guys. I'm one like the pump the brakes on some of this talk, and some of it's kind of out of hand. And I understand the excitement. I totally get it, and I see where everything goes. But we got to remember, Caleb is still a rookie. He's gonna have some struggles, right? We've been talking about Shane Waldren mostly all show here in terms of how is he going to come in and do it. Now it's great that he's got play calling experience. I love that. That's the first time I think we had a experienced play caller. The fact he's had success with 2 different type of quarterbacks, I think that's also great too. So those are the things for me there as well. Obviously, there's some still holes for me to fill on defense up front, especially. So let's see how the team comes together. But what you just like about the importance of the schedule. The one thing about a young team is if you get a couple of wins early on in the season, you get that good feeling, right? And then that leads down, a win here and a win there, and all of a sudden. But if you start off like 0-3, 0-4 last year, I forgot it was. I think it's 0-4, right? That like right there, you're deflated. First quarter of the season is already 0-4. We're talking about firing everybody. We're talking about coaches for next year. We're talking about the draft. It's only week 4 of the season, so that's the one thing that I would see for this young team. It's let's see how they get off to. What kind of start they get off to, right? If they get off to a good start, whether it's one thing I disagree with Lovie Smith on a lot of things, but one thing I did like about him is he cut everything down to quarters, right? That's first quarter, second quarter, third. If you go 3-1 the first quarter, and then you follow up with, they say, a 2-2, now you're 5-3, and if you go another 2-2, and then you're 7, just kind of stack, positive quarters. Don't go 1-3, or don't go 0-4. I think that's the key here for young teams, but. In terms of expectation, I don't want to put a number out there in terms of how many wins I expect. Do I expect to make the playoffs? It's going to be hard. I mean, guys, this division is stacked, right? And I think Green Bay makes it, assuming they all stay healthy. I think Green Bay and Detroit make the playoffs. Minnesota, you can go either way, depending on their quarterback situation, but they're a talented football team. And then we're talking about the rest of the NFC, right? We talk bounce back in Philly. You're talking about Dallas. You're talking about, the 49ers and the Rams. And there's a lot of talented teams here. So it's hard for me to say, yes, they're making the playoffs. So I just want to see them gel, get together, build a system around Caleb, build a defense that we saw in the last year, not the one we saw at the beginning of last year. And let's stack some wins together early on, get this team young, and that's some confidence. And now you roll some wins. And next thing you know, you have 7, 8 wins, 9 wins. Next thing you know, you're in the playoffs.
Well, and like you're in your conversation with Herb Howard, you mentioned Matt Eberflus and what a key he is to the season, the entire coaching staff. And Greg Gabriel talked about it this morning. This coaching staff has got to do the job now because the quality of the roster has been improved dramatically. And so you got to get a solid season out of Roma Dunze. You got to get a solid season out of Gerald Everett, somebody who you invested in free agency. Every player that's acquired, you got to, develop those players. I think it was the Packers that made the phrase draft and develop popular among NFL teams. And that's what the Bears have to do, but not only with their draft acquisitions, but their veterans too. Guys have to move up. Gervon Dexter has to be that guy this year from the inside pass rush situation. I love it that you picked Zach Pickens earlier in the show as your potential candidate for most improved breakout player of the year. Anybody else that you'd like to add to that list of potential breakout players or guys that you think is really important that they play well?
Well, one guy that kind of gets lost in the shuffle because of all the acquisitions they made this offseason is Tyler Scott. Now, I know he had a subpar rookie year last year, but he gives you that speed element, right? He gives you the guy that can get down in that slot and maybe get open down the football field. And with everyone paying attention to whether it's the tight ends or DJ Moore or Keenan Allen or even Robin Dunze, he's a guy that can get open down the football field. And if you can just find him and hit him, I think he's a guy that potentially could bring some big plays this year that we were kind of expecting him to provide last year. So Tyler Scott on offense is a guy to keep an eye on. And like I said, Zach Pickens, if he develops into that 3 technique that everyone's looking for, I think that's huge for this defense, because now you have a guy homegrown that has the skill set, has the ability to do it. Just be more consistent and get there and make it. The only thing I will say about Eberflus this year that we discussed it last year when they got off to a bad start. Is if you fired Eberflus during the season, who would you bring in to replace him? You really had no one on staff. Well, now you have Thomas Brown out there. Now you have Shane Waldren out there. Now you have Washington defensive coordinator out there. These all have their experience. So if they get off to a bad start with the expectations that this team has, and what Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles both said, towards the end of the last season, I would not say, they're not firing him. But again, no one's saying they're going to get off the bad. I'm saying, like, if it happens like last year, he's in jeopardy then, because you have guys on the staff that could take over.
That's a great thought, and hopefully it won't come to that. I asked Greg this morning on Gabriel Talks Football, because I have expectations that coaches can progress and get better as years go on. They learn, they absorb, and they adapt. A lot of coaches don't adapt, and that's their problem, their downfall. But so I asked Greg if he had an example of a coach who was in danger of losing his job and progressed to the point where he became a solid NFL coach. And he immediately said Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells, the general manager of the team, George Young, told Greg, I'm thinking about firing him. One more season. I'm going to give him one more season. And Bill learned from his mistakes, adjusted, became Bill Parcells. And so I'm not saying Matt Eberflus is going to be Bill Parcells, but it would be nice, right?
Yeah, I mean, from all the and again, just because I'm critical of the coach doesn't mean I want him to get fired, because the turnover is not healthy for the organization. It's not. Right. You start all over again. If you take all these picks the last 3 years, now you have a new system, a new scheme, a new coach. You can have to start drafting for that. It's upheaval, and it's hard. And I know some teams turn it around, but it's not easy. And I just you don't want that. But if he does, if he does get successful, if Shane is going to be who we think it is, and it turns Caleb into a very good player year one, and on the offense is scoring points, and if his defense is holding their end of the bargain, I think that obviously you're going to win games, and I think you'll be successful. I think then you have a recipe for success moving forward. But the one thing that scares me about defensive minded head coaches is, what is your plan after your offensive coordinator who has success leaves for another job? What is your plan there? Does he have a plan? If he's not, I would highly recommend he has a plan if Shane does become successful and he leaves for another team.
Well, the one thing that, arguably you can say is that with Kevin Warren's appearance, his role now as president and CEO, I think he's the kind of guy that injects that kind of thinking. Like that in corporate America has caused succession planning. So what happens if the defensive line coach gets hurt? Who do we have that's going to replace him? The defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator. I think that's something that the Chicago Bears have never rightly planned for, but I got to believe that under Kevin Warren and Ryan Post, they now have plans for that. Ryan Post did not when he first came in. It's clearly because Eberflus, you asked the question, Danny, if you fire him, who last year could have moved into the head coaching position? Nobody, unless maybe Hightower. So, but now there's more candidates, and I got to believe that there's more thinking about that from an entire organization standpoint, thanks to a experienced corporate type in Kevin Warren. Danny, any final? Wait a minute, we got a question here. J Rock says, Danny, if Caleb Williams has a monster year with Shane Waldron, do you let him find a head coaching job, or do you make him the head coach of the Bears?
Well, this was the was it Todd Monken and Lovie Smith with
That's right. Uh,
what's the quarterback? James Winston, right? That's what happened, wasn't it?
yes,
Where
yes.
they fired Lovey because Monken was going to lose. Listen, if we just talked about Matt Eberflus and his job status and all this, if the Bears are winning and they're a well coached team and it's functioning, you can't fire the head coach. And because you'll lose all credibility in the locker room, you can't just do that. If they're winning. Now, if they're teetering on 500 and they win 2 games, they lose 3, blah blah, and you think like Shane Waldren as potential to be a head coach, then you can talk about it. But it all depends on what happens in the season. So if Shane Waldren is being considered for head coaching candidate, that means the Bears had a winning record. They probably made the playoffs. So I don't see how you would fire Eberflus after that.
The one caveat, Danny, that I'll introduce, maybe you'll agree, is if they're winning by scores of 40-38, 50-30,
They're
and
not
the
winning because of
defense.
Eberflus. They're winning because of Caleb and Shane and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. So under that circumstance, I could see a potential move. All right, Danny, any final thoughts on the season finale of Draft on Tap?
Oh, it's just another great year. Again, thank you everyone that listens, everyone that watches, everyone that asks for scouting reports. Thank you to Aldo and everyone at the bar room for the platform. It was another great year. It was at times it was like just grinding. I was like, this never ending but the draft was the culmination. I was like my Christmas weekend, and it was awesome. I had a great time interacting with everyone, doing shows with everybody, and just thank you. And look forward to getting back into it again. I'm gonna step away a little bit, get away from football a little bit, just enjoy my kids and have some free time again. But looking forward to getting back on before 55 during the season. Hopefully, we'll have a post-game show and then also to get back to next year's Draft on Tap and start breaking down next year's prospect. But yeah, it was a pleasure. It was awesome. I think I told you guys yesterday, last week I should say, over 170 prospects I had scouted this year. So it was a lot of work, but it was fun too, because I was, every player, majority of all the players are coming up here, except for the punter. Of course, you had to pick a punter, that position I don't scout. But every position that player that came up, I'd scout, I'd seen them. So I'd hope give you guys some insight, some knowledge on those players. So I love doing this stuff, and I love the fact that you guys like it and like watching it, and hopefully continue watching and hit this like and subscribe button and all that stuff that Aldo tells you to do. And please come back next year.
All right, great parting words there, Danny, and I'll echo the words that I said at the beginning of the show. Truly, I don't know of anyone more devoted to the art of scouting. I know we've got other people at the bar room like Jordan and Greg. They pour through the tape and so forth, but I can just tell you from firsthand experience that nobody spends more time on it with having kids and having a 40-plus hour a week job. And there have been times where we started a show, I asked you, how you doing? I'm tired, man. I'm tired of turning through this tape and stuff. I know it's a passion. I know it's a passion project, but at the same time, people can get burned out on things that they love. Trust me, I've been married twice before. That's a joke.
Mundane a little bit if you're watching 7-10 defensive tackles, and you get a little mundane. But then what sparks the interest is when you see a wild play and you see someone do something unexpected, or doing the shows and talking about them and having the interaction with you and the guests and the listeners. I think that just fuels it. And I'm like, all right, I love this stuff. I love talking about it. I love breaking these guys down and all that stuff. So definitely it's a chore, especially with a full-time job and like I said, 2 kids, but I love it. I wouldn't change it. It's my passion.
Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to hear. So tomorrow, I want to remind everyone, I haven't set up the time yet with StreamYard, but if you are a subscriber on our YouTube channel or follow our X page or get audio podcasts from us at Barroom Network is where you can find us on X and just Barroom Network wherever you go to find our work. Tomorrow at 11, 12, or 1, sometime around there, I'm going to replay our draft coverage with Danny and John Buffone and Jordan Silvera and some other people that popped in for day 3 to get their immediate reaction to the picks. I think it's a really fascinating. I've edited together the first 3 rounds, and I'm working now on the last 2 players acquired. And I think it's a really fascinating approach to reliving the draft. And just I'll give you a little preview. In round 2, when the Bears drafted Rome Odunze, Jordan's reaction was like, maybe I'm following the wrong team. I mean, he was gushing. And then Danny and Jordan have a really good back and forth on who Rome compare, who the player count for Rome Odunze. And Danny says Devontae Adams, and Jordan first said Miles Austin. And I went, Miles Austin?
Yeah.
Really? Miles on. And Jordan did a really nice job of explaining why, because he doesn't have those immediate Devontae Adams type expectations for Rome. But it's a fascinating discussion. And John, of course, is John with his great interview style and his passion for the team. So that will be tomorrow. I will be live, just taking us from round to round to round. And then on Friday, it's Jeff Willis and Tim Willis putting their stamp on the Chicago Bears draft. And then after that, I'm going to join Danny. We're going to go to Tahiti somewhere, have a coconut rum or something like that.
Just don't wear a thong, please.
Trust me, those days are over. All right, everybody. Well, hopefully we'll see you soon. Take care, and thanks for another great season of Draft on Tap. Bye-bye.